In the history of NASCAR, there are drivers who win, and there are drivers who matter. Kurt Busch is both, but his path to the Hall of Fame wasn't a straight line. It was a jagged, messy, chaotic graph that went from the highest highs to the absolute rock bottom and then somehow back up again. This Friday in Charlotte, the blue jacket goes on his shoulders. He enters the Hall of Fame as a first-ballot legend. But to understand why this moment is so heavy, you have to understand just how close he came to losing it all. This isn't just a story about horsepower. It's a story about a kid from Vegas who fought everyone, including himself, and lived to tell the tale. Go back to the mid-90s, NASCAR was a closed club. If you weren't from the Carolinas, didn't have a southern accent, and your last name wasn't Petty, Earnhardt, or Jarrett, you were an outsider. Las Vegas wasn't the racing capital it is today. It was a desert outpost, and in that desert, a teenager named Kurt Busch was cutting his teeth on the bullring. There was no picture this moment, it was just grit. His dad, Tom, was a mechanic who ran a tool truck. He built cars that were fast, but they didn't have the budget to be pretty. Kurt learned early that if the car wasn't right, you drove it harder, you muscled it. By 1994, at just 15 years old, Kurt was running dwarf cars in Pahrump, Nevada. He won in his second start. That wasn't normal. Most kids wreck. Kurt won. That raw, unpolished speed caught the eye of the few people watching out west. But the real turning point was the gong show. That's what they called Jack Roush's scouting combine. Jack Roush, the cat in the hat, was looking for talent, and he didn't care about pedigree. He put a bunch of young drivers in identical cars and told them to go fast. Kurt didn't just beat them, he embarrassed them. Roush saw something in Kurt that reminded him of the old-school racers, a total lack of fear. He signed him to drive the Nobut 99 truck in 2000. Kurt won 4 times that year. He finished second in the championship as a rookie. It was obvious that the truck series was too small for him. He skipped the Busch series, now Xfinity, almost entirely. He went straight to Cup. In September 2000, he's lining up at Dover. He looks to his left, Dale Earnhardt Sr. He looks to his right, Jeff Gordon. A few years ago, he was doing homework in Nevada. Now he's trading paint with the Intimidator. The early 2000s were the golden era of NASCAR's expansion, and Kurt became its face whether people liked it or not. One moment defined his tenacity. Darlington, 2003, the closest finish in NASCAR history. Kurt Busch versus Ricky Craven. The two of them slamming into each other all the way to the line, smoke pouring off the tires, metal crunching. Craven won by inches, but Kurt didn't complain. He loved the battle. That race showed everyone that Kurt Busch wasn't just a finesse driver. He was a brawler. 2004, NASCAR introduced the Chase, the first playoff system. The pressure was immense. 10 races to decide the champion. Kurt, driving the 97 car, survived the chaos. He outdrove Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon. At 26 years old, he was the Cup Series champion. He was sitting on top of the world. But looking back, Kurt admits he wasn't ready for that view. He had the talent of a champion, but the maturity of a teenager. The Kurt Busch radio became a genre of entertainment itself. He would scream at his crew chief, scream at his spotter, scream at the clouds. He was angry, always angry. And eventually the talent wasn't enough to cover the noise. The unraveling didn't happen overnight. It was a slow burn of burned bridges. First, it was the exit from Roush Racing in 2005. A traffic stop in Arizona turned into a public relations nightmare, and Roush had enough. He was suspended and let go. Roger Penske threw him a lifeline, the Blue Deuce. Driving for Penske is prestigious. They demand perfection. For a while, it worked. Kurt won races. He was elite. But the anger was still there, simmering. In 2011, the cracks turned into canyons. The radio outbursts became legendary for all the wrong reasons. He was verbally abusing his team. Then came the incident with Jerry Punch, a respected reporter, where Kurt lashed out on camera. Roger Penske, a man who values image above all else, cut ties. Kurt Busch, a former champion in the prime of his career, was unemployed. But it got worse. 2012 to 2014 were the dark years. He was driving for tiny, underfunded teams. He went from flying on private jets to wondering if his car would even finish the race. Then came the legal issues in 2015, allegations of domestic violence that rocked the sport. NASCAR suspended him indefinitely. He was the first driver suspended under the domestic violence policy. Although no charges were filed and he was eventually reinstated, the court of public opinion had already convicted him. He was the outlaw, but not in the cool way. He was toxic. Sponsors wouldn't touch him. Fans booed him louder than anyone else. Most drivers would have quit. Most would have faded away. Kurt Busch stood in the wreckage of his own making and decided to drive his way out. Redemption in racing is rare. Usually, once you slide down the ladder, you don't climb back up. Kurt defied the odds. He started with James Finch at Phoenix Racing. It was a humble, chaotic team. Kurt wrecked cars, but he also ran them up front where they had no business being. He reminded everyone, "I can drive anything." Then, he went to Furniture Row Racing in Colorado. A single-car team based outside of NASCAR's Charlotte hub. Kurt took them to the playoffs. He proved he could build a program. Gene Haas saw the change. He brought Kurt to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2014. This was his last real shot at a top-tier ride. And this time, Kurt was different. He was working with a sports psychologist. He was calmer. He started treating his crew like partners instead of servants. The payoff was monumental. The 2017 Daytona 500. It was a race of attrition. Cars were running out of fuel everywhere. Kurt, using years of experience, saved just enough gas. He made the pass on the final lap and took the checkered flag. As he screamed on the radio, it wasn't in anger, it was pure, unfiltered joy. The rearview mirror fell off the car during his celebration. It was poetic. He wasn't looking back anymore. By 2019, the narrative had flipped. Kurt Busch wasn't the villain. He was the cool older brother. He went to Chip Ganassi Racing and instantly made the team faster. He mentored young drivers like Ross Chastain. The garage started to respect him not just for his hands, but for his mind. Then, the phone rang. It was Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan. They were building 23XI Racing. They had the money, they had the hype, but they needed a veteran to steer the ship. They didn't want the 2004 Kurt Busch. They wanted the 2021 Kurt Busch. The meeting with Jordan is now legendary. MJ, the greatest competitor in sports history, told Kurt, "We want you because you race like I played. You race with your heart." For a guy who had been called a hothead his whole life, hearing that from Jordan was validation. It meant the passion wasn't a flaw. It was his superpower, once he learned to control it. In 2022, driving the Jordan-branded car, wearing the Jumpman logo, Kurt raced like a man possessed at Kansas Speedway. He battled Kyle Larson, the best driver in the world at that moment, and beat him clean. It would be his 34th and final win. He stood on his car, arms raised, soaking it in. We didn't know it then, but that was the curtain call. Racing is cruel. It doesn't care about your story arc. The 23rd of July, 2022. Pocono Raceway. Qualifying. The car snaps loose in turn 3. Kurt backs it into the wall. It looked like a routine hit. We've seen thousands of them. Kurt dropped the window net. He walked away. But the brain is fragile. The impact caused a severe concussion, vestibular damage. The doctors said no. 1 week turned into 2. 2 turned into a month. And slowly, the realization set in. He wasn't coming back. At 44 years old, on the verge of another playoff run, it was over. His retirement speech at Daytona wasn't sad, though. It was grateful. The old Kurt would have been furious at the injustice of it. The new Kurt simply said, "I'm at peace." He knew he had left nothing on the table. So, when Kurt Busch walks across that stage in Charlotte this Friday, what are we celebrating? Are we celebrating the 34 wins? The 2004 championship? The Daytona 500? Sure. But the real victory isn't in the stats. The real victory is that Kurt Busch grew up in front of us. He showed us the ugly side of ambition, and then he showed us the beautiful side of redemption. He paved the way for Vegas drivers. He set the bar for his brother, Kyle, who became a 2-time champion. He helped build teams that will race long after he's gone. He was the outlaw. He was the Busch brother everyone hated. And now, he is a Hall of Famer. Congratulations, Kurt. What a ride!